the global Formula apex is once again on the brink of controversy, and this time, all eyes are locked on Mercedes. What started as quiet whispers in the pit lane has now escalated into a full-scale investigation by the FIA. The question that's sending shockwaves across the grid is simple, but explosive: is Mercedes running an illegal front wing? At first glance, everything looked normal. Mercedes arrived with what seemed like a subtle aerodynamic upgrade, nothing unusual in a sport where marginal gains decide championships. But within just a few laps, rival teams began to notice something strange. The front wing wasn't behaving like a conventional design. It appeared to flex under load in a way that gave the car a significant aerodynamic advantage, especially at high speeds. Now, flexibility in F1 components is not new. Teams have always tried to exploit grey areas in the regulations. But there's a fine line between innovation and illegality, and Mercedes may have just stepped over it. According to sources inside the paddock, the FIA has begun a detailed inspection of Mercedes' front wing assembly. The concern: under static load tests, the wing appears to pass all legal requirements. But on track, at racing speeds, it seems to bend just enough to reduce drag while maintaining downforce in corners. That's the kind of advantage that could be worth tenths of a second per lap. And in Formula One, that's everything. Rival teams are not staying silent. Engineers from multiple teams have reportedly submitted formal complaints, urging the FIA to take immediate action. They argue that Mercedes has found a loophole, a clever interpretation of the rules that allows the wing to behave differently under dynamic conditions, compared to FIA testing scenarios. And here's where things get even more interesting. The current FIA regulations state that aerodynamic components must remain rigid under specified load tests. Mercedes, however, appears to have engineered a structure that is technically compliant during those tests, but behaves entirely differently when subjected to real-world aerodynamic forces. It's not just smart engineering, it's borderline genius. But is it legal? This is exactly what the FIA is now trying to determine. The investigation isn't just about one component. It's about the integrity of the sport. If Mercedes is allowed to continue using this design, it could open the floodgates for other teams to push similar concepts to the limit. And suddenly, the entire grid could be operating in a regulatory grey zone. But let's talk about performance, because that's where this story truly explodes. Data from recent sessions suggests that Mercedes has gained a noticeable advantage on straights without sacrificing cornering speed. That's a rare combination. Normally, teams have to choose between low drag or high downforce. But if this front wing is doing what people believe it's doing, Mercedes may have found a way to have both. And that changes everything. Drivers have reportedly felt the difference as well. The car appears more stable in high-speed sections while remaining agile in tight corners. That kind of balance is incredibly difficult to achieve, and it's exactly what championship-winning cars are made of. Naturally, this has sparked frustration among rival teams. Some believe Mercedes has crossed a line. Others argue that this is simply the nature of Formula One, where pushing boundaries is part of the game. But the FIA cannot afford to ignore this. In recent years, we've seen similar controversies shake the sport. Flexible wings, trick suspension systems, and innovative interpretations of the rules have all led to mid-season technical directives. And each time, the FIA has had to step in to clarify the regulations. This situation feels no different. But the stakes are higher than ever. If the FIA rules the front wing illegal, Mercedes could be forced to remove or redesign it immediately. That would not only impact their performance, but could also affect the entire competitive order. On the other hand, if the design is deemed legal, it could trigger a development war unlike anything we've seen in recent seasons. Teams would scramble to replicate the concept. Engineers would work around the clock to find similar advantages, and suddenly, the grid would enter a new phase of aerodynamic innovation. But here's the twist: timing. The FIA's decision is expected soon, and it couldn't come at a more critical point in the season. With championships on the line, even the smallest regulation change can have massive consequences, and Mercedes knows this. They've been here before. Accusations, investigations, and technical scrutiny are nothing new for a team that has dominated the sport for years. But this situation feels different. The level of attention, the pressure from rival teams, and the potential impact on the championship make this one of the most intense technical battles we've seen in a long time. Fans are divided. Some see this as brilliance, a perfect example of pushing engineering to its absolute limit. Others see it as bending the rules too far. But one thing is certain, everyone is watching. Because this isn't just about a front wing. It's about innovation versus regulation. It's about how far a team can go before crossing the line. And it's about who will come out on top in one of the most competitive eras of Formula One. As the investigation continues, the tension in the paddock is only growing. Every session, every lap, every piece of data is being analyzed. Teams are watching Mercedes closely, trying to understand exactly what they've done, and whether they can do it too. The FIA now faces a critical decision. Do they clamp down and enforce stricter rules? Or do they allow this level of innovation to continue, even if it creates an uneven playing field? Whatever the outcome, this moment could define the season. Because in Formula One, it's not just about speed, it's about who understands the rules better than anyone else. And right now, Mercedes might have just rewritten them. As the FIA's investigation intensifies, the atmosphere inside the paddock has shifted from curiosity to outright tension. What was once dismissed as a clever aerodynamic tweak is now being treated as a potential game-changing controversy that could redefine the competitive order of the entire grid. And the deeper analysts go into Mercedes' front-wing design, the more complex and controversial the situation becomes. Engineers across multiple teams have begun dissecting high-speed footage, slow-motion replays, and telemetry data, trying to uncover exactly how Mercedes has achieved this unusual behavior. Frame analysis suggests that the front wing elements subtly alter their angle at high velocity, effectively reducing drag on straights, while still generating strong downforce when the car enters corners. It's a dynamic characteristic that traditional designs simply don't exhibit under the same conditions. What makes this even more fascinating is how precisely controlled this flexibility appears to be. This isn't random bending or structural weakness. It looks engineered, calculated, and incredibly refined. The wing seems to respond differently depending on speed, airflow pressure, and even track conditions. If that's truly the case, then Mercedes hasn't just built a component, they've created a responsive aerodynamic system operating within millimeter-level tolerances. And that's exactly what's making rival teams uneasy. Because if Mercedes has found a way to legally simulate an adaptive aerodynamic effect without using any active systems, which are strictly banned in Formula One, it could represent one of the most advanced interpretations of the rules in recent history. Essentially, they may have unlocked performance that mimics active aero, without technically breaking the rules. This is where the FIA's challenge becomes incredibly complicated. Regulations are written to define limits, but innovation often lives in the spaces between those limits. The FIA must now determine whether Mercedes' front wing violates the spirit of the regulations, even if it complies with the letter of the law. And that distinction, spirit versus letter, is where some of the most controversial decisions in F1 history have been made. Sources suggest that the FIA is not only relying on standard load tests, but is also considering introducing new dynamic testing procedures. These would simulate real-world aerodynamic forces more accurately, potentially exposing behaviors that static tests fail to detect. If implemented, this could not only impact Mercedes but also set a new precedent for how components are evaluated moving forward. Meanwhile, the political side of Formula One is beginning to emerge. Team principals are reportedly engaging in intense behind-the-scenes discussions, lobbying the FIA for clarity, and, in some cases, immediate action. Some teams want a swift ruling that could potentially ban the design before it delivers further advantage. Others are more cautious, aware that any ruling could set a precedent that might later affect their own innovations. This isn't just a technical battle, it's a strategic war. And in the middle of it all are the drivers. While much of the focus is on engineering, drivers have quietly begun adapting their styles to maximize whatever advantage the car provides. Reports indicate that the Mercedes drivers are carrying more speed into corners with increased confidence, likely benefiting from the added stability generated by the front wing. On straights, the reduced drag allows for better top-end performance, making overtaking both easier and more effective. That combination, cornering grip and straight-line speed, is something every team chases, but rarely achieves simultaneously. And that's why this situation is so explosive. Because if the design is deemed legal, it could force every team on the grid to rethink their entire aerodynamic philosophy. Development programs would shift overnight. Wind tunnel testing would be redirected. Budgets would be reallocated. The ripple effect would be massive. But if it's ruled illegal, the consequences could be just as dramatic. Mercedes would need to redesign a critical component under intense time pressure, potentially losing performance in the process. That could alter race outcomes, championship standings, and even long-term development strategies. In a sport where consistency is key, such a disruption could have lasting effects. There's also the question of timing, something that could influence the FIA's decision as much as the technical details themselves. Mid-season regulation changes are always controversial. Teams argue that they disrupt fair competition, especially if one team has already invested heavily in a particular concept. On the other hand, allowing a potentially illegal advantage to continue could undermine the integrity of the championship. It's a delicate balance, and one the FIA must handle carefully. Fans, meanwhile, are watching every development with intense interest. Social media is filled with debates, theories, and breakdowns of the situation. Some believe Mercedes has outsmarted the system. Others think they've gone too far. But regardless of opinion, one thing is clear: this controversy has captured the attention of the entire Formula One community, and it's not slowing down. Every new session brings more data. Every new race weekend adds another layer to the story. Cameras are zooming in on the front wing during pit stops. Analysts are comparing footage from different tracks. Even minor changes in design are being scrutinized like never before, because everyone is searching for answers. What exactly has Mercedes done? How far can they push it? And most importantly, will they be allowed to continue? The answers to these questions could shape not just this season, but the future of Formula One engineering, because moments like this don't just define races, they define eras. If the FIA ultimately rules in favor of Mercedes, it could signal a new age of flexible aerodynamic concepts, where teams push materials and structures to their absolute limits. If they rule against it, we could see stricter regulations and more aggressive enforcement designed to prevent similar situations in the future. Either way, the impact will be felt across the entire grid. And perhaps that's what makes this story so compelling. It's not just about one team or one component. It's about the constant evolution of a sport where innovation and regulation are locked in an endless battle. A battle where every advantage is questioned, every detail is analyzed, and every decision carries enormous weight. Right now, Mercedes stands at the center of that battle, and the world is waiting to see what happens next.